Hi, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Carrie Siggins, and I'm so glad you're here today. Today, my guest is Sam Jacobs. I met Sam through my good friend, Chris Shimbra, who has also been on this show. Sam is the CEO and founder of Pavilion, which is a private membership group for high growth professionals, providing support that they need to get where they want to go. And he started Pavilion after he got fired from his fifth job. He had worked as a sales executive for many companies in the startup environment, and he was tired of the quick turnover that inherently happens in these high growth tech companies. Which we talk about in the podcast. So he decided he was going to start this company to be able to help teach people how to provide more value to an organization, how to accelerate revenue growth and add more value, and how to be able to build this network of people who help each other. He also wrote a book called Kind Folks Finish First, and it talks about the value of kindness. And when you have this mentality of helping people first, that it can help you drive your career, it sets you apart, it brings you joy, it makes you a better person. And the book is about his journey of starting Pavilion and how having this kindness first mindset really set him apart and helped him build this amazing company. I can't wait for you to meet Sam. He is just amazing. You're going to love this interview. So hang tight and I'll be right back. All right, everyone. I am back with Sam Jacobs. Sam, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Carrie.
Awesome. All right. So before we jump into what got you to where you are today, can you, in your own words, describe what Pavillion is and maybe what sparked the idea?
Sure, of course. Yeah. So I'm Sam. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Pavilion. Pavilion is, we think, the largest community, paid membership community for revenue executives, meaning sales, marketing, customer success, operations, and CEOs and founders. So revenue community for high growth companies, meaning venture capital backed B2B tech startups, right? So we're the largest community for those kinds of folks in the world. And we build products and services to help them. We call it unlock and achieve their professional potential, which just means that we give them training, we give them access to resources. We're really an organization designed to help people navigate their careers more effectively and to help their companies and themselves grow to their fullest potential. Now, I've been doing it for about 9 years, and the origin of the company is really the backdrop of my career journey, which is that I've been fired 4 of my last 5 jobs. I've been doing startup sales for 20 years now here in New York City. And you'll probably hear the sirens in the background shortly, which will confirm that, I'm not in a hidden bunker, but I am in the middle of the city. And a couple things happened, particularly from 2010 to 2018. One of those things is that, as I mentioned, my tenure kept shrinking as I became more senior. And I've been working in startups exclusively, so venture capital-backed high-growth technology companies. And the first place I worked 7.5 years, the next place I worked 4.5 years, the next place 18 months, then 9 months, then 10 months. So my tenure was shrinking. And of course, I'm a difficult person to get along with, and I've got lots of personality quirks. But it turns out that story is not specific to me, that the average tenure for a revenue executive at a high-growth company is just 17 months. It's just 1.5 years on average. And so that was happening while technology continued to change all of our jobs and all of our job descriptions. And where it just wasn't, there is no common description for a chief revenue officer or chief marketing officer. We think we know what they're supposed to do, but there's so many different technologies, tools, motions, playbooks, and there's no one place that you can learn it all. Certainly not, at Wharton or Harvard or something like that. It's going to have to be on the ground, on the front lines with people that are doing the job in real time. And so I created Pavilion as a mechanism for myself. First, to bring people together so that we could all share best practices. Second, so that we could commiserate when things were tough and times were difficult, and to help us find the next opportunity. And it was because, again, I just think that, when I was growing up, the idea that a career would be, my parents worked basically one place their whole lives. They worked for the U.S. State Department, and they were foreign service officers, and that's the one place they worked. And the idea that you'd work 15 to 20 different companies over the course of 20 to 30 years is, I think, a pretty new phenomenon. And we meaning the working professional public, we need resources that help us navigate that uncertainty with more confidence. If we're all going to be freelancers, if we're all going to be part effectively of the gig economy in some way, then we're going to need a place where we can find the next gig. We're going to need a place that trains us and certifies us. And so in that way, we're almost like the modern day version of a guild or, a trade association of some kind, but, for profit, digital first, and focused on giving people the skills they need to succeed in the companies of today.
So why is that such a short tenure? Why has it been shrinking? Why is it 17 months for a revenue executive?
I think there's a lot of different reasons. Honestly, I think the biggest reason is just the pace of change in the world. If I had to ascribe one specific thing, you can see we're all focused on instant gratification. We're all glued to our phones. We all lack a sense of patience or a long-term time horizon because I think the world moves more quickly than it used to. I think that's the headline. Now, there are a bunch of sub-bullets underneath that. One of them is that companies have raised a tremendous amount of capital over the last 10 years and 15 years with the explosion of venture capital and, of course, different kinds of private equity. Capital is global in nature, right? Now more than ever, sovereign wealth funds and people from all over the world are investing in high-growth companies. And the consequence of that is that the growth expectations for a lot of these companies are very, very high. And that means that there's less patience on the part of the CEOs and founders and the investors. But it also means it's not just about, there's no bad guy or bad gal or good guy or good gal. It is also true, I can tell you as a CEO, that when you're growing at a rapid rate, the company itself is different. It's a different company. The company, we're about a close to $20 million business, really 16, so I'm rounding up very aggressively. But 2 years ago, when Elephant Ventures invested in us in April of 2021, we were a $4 million company, right? So in 2 years, we've grown about 4x. The challenges that we face today, they're not really related to the challenges that we faced 2 years ago. And the job itself is different. It's a different job. And so as you grow through these stages, again, if you're growing 10% a year, then the job might be the same over 4 or 5 years. Or you at least have the luxury of time to grow into those skills that are required. But when you're doubling or tripling, or at least are expected to, even if you're not realizing those goals, it's just a different job. And so I think that sometimes that just means that there's a lot of people that quickly move through their comfort zone to, the Peter principle, to the place of their least competence. And it just requires somebody sometimes with more experience at that stage that has seen the movie before, as they say, and that has skills that are necessary for where the company is in its growth trajectory. So I think it's the rate of change fundamentally. I think there's less patience and more capital being deployed that expects and is seeking a higher return. And I also just think that companies themselves are changing so quickly that it's hard for people to be the relevant person at every single stage of that company's growth.
And how do companies and sales executives make this switch, right? Because to even start to understand a company and how you're really going to drive things, it's 6 months at a minimum. So basically, if you're not performing you get 6-month grace period. So if you're not performing in a year, you're out. How do you overcome that? It's expensive, and it's obviously probably unrealistic to be able to demand this out of mere mortals. So what are companies trying to do to balance this? Or do you think it's just the way that it's going to be for a while? If you're not meeting those growth targets, then, it's on to somebody else.
I think so first of all, Pavillion arose when I was not a CEO. It arose when I was a sales executive, and it was much more at the beginning, us versus them. Yeah. And so one of the things that we teach is how to negotiate, right? So it may be true that a year and a half, candidly, Carrie, I get bored myself, pretty quickly when I'm working for somebody else. So it may be true that a year and a half is the right amount of time. If that's the case, that might be okay, but we need a different deal. They need a different deal then. Mm-hmm. And the deal needs to reflect that reality. So for example, when we started Pavillion, we introduced this concept of the Bill of Rights, they're not really rights in the same way that it's like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's a negotiating framework, but there's 5 pieces to it. The first is due diligence, which just means you have a right to like know what the company is doing and how well they're doing before you start working for them. But the next ones are more important. The right to align compensation. So one of the reasons sales leaders get fired is because they're so focused on cash comp that they come in and they have to be the highest paid person in the room, even when that doesn't make sense for the business. And it ends up, they make short-term decisions that aren't in the long-term interest of the company, and they put the company over its skis. And that certainly happened to me. The third is the right to liquidity. Again, not really a right, but the point is, how do you negotiate for equity? How do you structure your deal so that you increase the likelihood that that you can make money from the ownership percentage in the company? And then the fourth is the one that's probably most relevant, which is the right to severance. So what we teach people is, hey, it's okay to pre-negotiate. If it's likely that you're only going to be there a year and a half, then you need a couple things. First, you might need pre-negotiated severance so that it's a little bit more expensive. It's a little bit tougher for the company to say goodbye to you. And the second thing you might need is the right to consult. So in most employment agreements, there's this concept of, assignment of invention, right? Like whatever you invent while you work for me is my property, not yours. And we advocate that there should be a right to monetize your non-competitive expertise, which just means that if you're a sales leader and you've been teaching sales and doing sales for 20 years, I think you should be able to do consulting and to build side revenue streams so that you're not so dependent. That gives the company the freedom to do what they need to do, but it also gives you the freedom to build, to build some security and some stability into your life and really monetize the expertise that you develop. So one part I think of the answer is, hey, we need a different deal. And I also just think, candidly, I really do think like work is changing. I really do see it. I see that. I think it's going to be a lot more. I think Uber and Lyft and DoorDash are not going to be the model just for low-end service workers. I think, I talked to all kinds of companies. I had breakfast this morning with my friend Matt Blumberg, who's the CEO of a company called Bolster, and they are a marketplace for fractional executive support. So instead of hiring somebody full-time, you hire an interim VP of finance. And what we were talking about literally is an entirely new type of employment model where you basically, you never hire the executive. You go through almost like an RPO or a placement agency or a staffing agency like this company Bolster. And then everybody that is an executive with Bolster puts their equity into a pot so that you as the employer, as the company, as the startup, you can swap people out whenever you want. It doesn't really affect the people that are being swapped out because they're part of a separate profit pool that is part of their guild, their union, whatever you want to call it. And the company can make the changes that it needs to make as it goes. So I think that's a little bit technical in terms of the details, but the point is that I really do think that the way that people work with companies is continuously changing, especially now.
And so it's super interesting. I just read an article too that talked about, the difference in the United States and that wealthy people typically work more than people, middle class or in poverty. And that's reversed in most countries. Like in Cambodia, people who are poor work a lot more hours than wealthy people. But in the United States, wealthy people have always for the last 50 years have worked more hours. And that's going backwards. So in 2022, the average wealthy male worked 77 hours less than they did in 2021. Wow. And I find that to be really fascinating because I do think that there's so much shift that's going on with work and people coming out of COVID saying, companies aren't loyal to me. I don't want to work this hard. How can I do something that's different that allows me to live the lifestyle that I want that isn't just so work focused, making money focused, that I can, have more purpose and meaning in my life. So I wonder how that ties into all of this too, is being able to say, okay, I'm going to be in a fractional executive, and be able to maybe have more flexibility in creating the life that I want. Do you think that there's some interest of that at play here?
100%. I can tell you that the big moment in my life, was 2017. I wrote a book called Kind Folks Finish First, and it's about the starting of Pavilion. It is here. I'll just flash it on the camera really quickly because I've got it right there. But the point is, it starts on Friday the 13th, 2017, and it was when I was fired from my second to last job. And what I did immediately upon getting fired was start a consulting business. And I can tell you that the freedom that I enjoyed being a consultant was so liberating. And the idea that I was making money that could directly go into my bank account, and it wasn't 1% or 4% or 10%, it wasn't a commission. It was my ability to, if I signed a client for 10 grand, 10 grand went into my bank account. And that hadn't happened to me in a really long time. I hadn't run my own business since I was, 22, 23 years old. So the answer to your question is yes. It's if you can make it work, if you have the expertise, and that's why I don't know that it's appropriate for people earlier in their career, but later in your career, as you develop a point of view and you develop expertise, yeah, I think that it's a different life. It's a better life. Now, what are the drawbacks? One of the drawbacks is which is why I was referencing that profit pool for that other company, because the problem with consulting or being a fractional executive is it's really hard to get rich,
Yep.
or to generate wealth. Everybody has a different frame on that, but to generate long-term sustainable capital that can earn a return where you don't have to work on income and you can make 8% or 10% in the stock market and that can be your money. It's really hard to do as a consultant because you don't have equity value. There's nothing that's building while you sleep. When you work at a company, the machine is being built. And even though it might take a long time, at some point, the machine runs even when you're not paying attention to it. Really hard to do as a fractional executive. And that's why there needs to be new structures around ownership so that you can accumulate some wealth. Last thing I'll say, though, sort of relatedly to the point about working less, I just think there's a bigger question, which is what is work? What is work?
Right.
Because for me, I have the best job in the world, and you run your own company too, Carrie, so I'm sure you know this, but like, what is work to me? I'm at home you can see me, right? I'm in my living room. Is this work? I'm talking on a podcast about stuff that I'm really interested in. I guess it's work. Is it work when I'm thinking about the business problems that my company is struggling with? I guess that's work. Is it work when I check my phone, for 10 minutes before I read my book at night? I guess that's work, So I just think so many things about the way life was structured were created, that the models were created before the internet, before the mobile internet, right? It was all desktop computing. And also when work meant something different, because I think that work used to be a lot harder and more rigorous and grueling, and that's not what it's like anymore. And so even the concept of retirement, you can even look at our octogenarian president to know that some people can't even get the message on when they should retire. But the point is I'm never going to retire. What is retire? Am I going to stop doing interesting, creative things that hopefully have some value to the world? No, I'm never going to do that. I might not be working on this company, but I'll always be doing something that I hope is useful to somebody else. And so just even the concept of retirement, I think, is one that may need some revisitation.
Yep, for sure. I was just having a conversation. People always ask me why do you do all these things that you do? I write, I speak, I have my 3 podcasts, and I was talking to my VP of HR, and I told her, I said, it's been such an interesting process to go and start to build out this platform of really what I believe around ownership thinking and the ownership mindset and how I view leadership. And I started it in COVID. I was like, I have this need for something that's really creative. And I want to be able to have a secondary source of revenue. So, I speak a lot. But I told her, I said, through all of this and the years I've been doing it, I am truly an expert in leadership. Not because I wrote a book and I call myself that, but being a CEO for 16 years and then over the last 5 years, fully immersing myself every single week, talking to exceptional leaders, doing my own podcasts on my leadership, writing my book, writing for Forbes, writing for Entrepreneur, which are all things that feed my soul and will obviously help me in whatever I decide to do next, what retirement is, which will never happen. But it has so benefited my company, hands down. I am a significantly better leader than I was 5 years ago because of all of the knowledge I have literally immersed myself in from doing this. And it is work. and but it's not something that feels like work, like what you said, the grueling, like, ugh, I have to get out of bed and do this kind of thing. And it's so benefited the company. And so at Stone Age, I encourage my employees to be able to pursue those passions, because just because you're doing something outside does not mean that it's not going to benefit Stone Age inside. And so how do we create this environment where people can live their dreams but not have to not work for us because they can't have the side gig, or they don't feel like, it's safe to say, hey, I'm interested in doing something like this. Can I get a little bit of help? And so I think it's a really, I've had my whole world opened up because of this process that I've gone through, kind of, not really intentionally thinking about the outcome that has actually happened, and the way that I have really been like empowered in my own leadership thinking. And so, it's a long way of asking, like, do you think companies are going to support this? Right? Because like my eyes were open, and I want to make sure that people in my company feel like they can do these things, because I do think it's going to benefit us. Do you think that most companies see it that way? That if somebody said, I want to have consulting on the side, that's seen as a positive thing?
Well, I think over time, yes. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we're in this moment to the point where companies can't have it both ways. If it's exactly what you said, if we want to fire people whenever we want to fire people, and we don't want to make long-term promises to people, and we need to be flexible, and if it's a downturn we get small, and if it's an upturn we get big, then people themselves need to have options, and they need to have resources, and they need to take agency over their lives. And also, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's sort of different because there's also like this, there's this like this whole trend where people actually have like multiple full-time jobs, and that I
Yeah.
do have a problem with.
Yes.
But
Agree.
in terms of side hustles and people sharpening their saw and developing skills and insights through consulting and through public speaking and through immersion and other kinds of networks and communities, yeah, I mean, I firmly believe in that. I think the main thing is, not the main thing, but something that what all of this does in a remote world, if we're completely remote, is it just increases to the point of what you're focused on and what you're an expert in. It increases the requirements for leadership, right? Because it's like you got to be really clear about what your KPIs are and what you're expecting from your people. You can't. I don't know if the people, like, I think that people who work for me work hard. I mean, I assume they do. But I think it's really incumbent upon me to say, this is what's expected. And if you deliver what's expected, then you're doing a good job. And if
Yep.
I can't define what's expected, then that's on me. And
Yep.
I think that the office filled in a lot of gaps for people in previous years that are not filled in right now. And frankly, because I talk to tons of CEOs, as you do, I think a lot of people are talking about going back to the office. I
Yeah.
think there was this whole moment during COVID when we're never going back. We love working from home. I think some people do, but I think that you don't know what you don't know, and it's really hard to build culture and really hard to drive productivity if you're completely remote the whole time.
Yep, I agree. I think hybrid's the way to go, and offering some flexibility. I know that I like it myself, right? I work from home 2 days a week because I can be so productive. But then I'm in the office 3, and sometimes it's inverse, and sometimes in the office all 5 days, depending on what's going on. But that is really a powerful thing when you feel like you have the flexibility to do both, but you can't not be in the office. What you miss there in terms of culture building and relationship building and networking, right? Which I know is something that you're super passionate about and believe in deeply. You can't do that. They can't do that remotely, at least not at the same depth. And so I think that, for us, the future is hybrid. It's trying, I mean, we're an employee-owned company, and I want my employees to act and think like owners. And we set very clear expectations around, what is expected at work, and we're high performing. And if you can't keep up, it's going to be obvious. But we don't do that. But we also say the relationships you build are just as important as the work that you get done. And so how do we be able to combine both of those so you can have super productive days at home, and you can come into the office and you can build those relationships and those networks that you need to be able to be successful and be a great teammate. So, we're playing around with what that hybrid schedule looks like so that we can create that flexibility, but not give up the really important thing of being face to face.
Well, and I commend you, and I'm in a different position because when my company first started growing, we were looking at office space. And of course, that was February 2020.
Right.
And so then that didn't happen. And we started hiring people from all over the country. And then it became impractical to have an office.
Yeah.
And now I'm not making any like rash decisions, but I had a call with our head of people today where I said, well, on the margin, like, let's look for people that are within 100 miles of New York City,
Yeah.
or 200 miles. Like, let's have some opportunity where we can get together regularly as a team, because I agree with you. It's missing. It's missing. Yeah. And it's hard to get people, because all of it is about how do you get the best work from people, as I'm sure you know. Well, you got to give them something to believe in. You got to give them a vision, and you got to give them something bigger than themselves, something where they feel part of a team that's accomplishing a goal. And it's just harder to do on Zoom. It's not the same thing, a bunch of squares on your laptop, as a bunch of people in a room high-fiving and cheering.
Yep. Totally agree. Totally agree. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about networking, since we just dabbled in that. And I know that's a big part of your book. So tell me, like, what is your philosophy on networking, and not just like building it, but like actually doing something with it?
I have, it's pretty straightforward. May or may not be surprising, but I'm a pretty introverted person for somebody that runs a networking organization. And so how do I think about it? I think about it that, there's a couple key principles that are articulated in the book. One of them is build relationships, not transactions. The second is play a big, long game versus a short, small game, which just means, and then the final piece is, look to give before you get. Look to offer assistance before you receive assistance. Collectively, what that means is that I view networking as an opportunity to help other people. And I'm not just saying that because I think I'm like a good person, or I'm trying to be Mother Teresa. It's because, the reason the book is called Kind Folks Finish First, obviously a play on Nice Guys Finish Last, is, the publishers came to me when I pitched them the book. They said, I love the book, but shouldn't we call it like the kindness principle, or kind? Why do you have to call it Kind Folks Finish First? It's not really about finishing first. It's just about the good feeling that you have by helping other people. I said, no, that's not correct. That is incorrect. This is a strategy for business success. And the strategy for business success is that it's okay to want what you want. It's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to want to achieve things. But this is just a different formula, a different playbook. It's not to say that the other playbook doesn't work. It's just to say that this is a different playbook. And in this playbook, you look to help other people. And so my point is, for me, networking is looking for opportunities to help people. And it's specifically looking to connect them to resources, to offer them insights or perspectives they might need, to help them find a job. All of my business, Pavillion, emerged from doing that because I was doing it in my spare time and I really enjoyed it. And I thought a lot about, what is it that I enjoy? I enjoy the feeling of almost like a puzzle piece connecting, or like a Lego snapping into place. When you make a connection between two people that you think should hit it off and might be able to help each other, and then you find out that they did help each other and they did hit it off. And that feeling that you get of, that person you introduced me to 6 weeks ago, they hired me, I got a new job, thanks. And so for me, networking is really about, you put as many deposits as you can into the bank of karma, and then you just don't have any specific withdrawal date. You say, I will get paid back. I'm not going to worry about exactly when and how, but I know I will get paid back. And my experience is that it works. My experience is that, and that to the point of like the title of the book, this is a terrible metaphor. I shouldn't use it, but nevertheless, the beginning of The Godfather, Don Corleone, he can't refuse a favor on his daughter's wedding day. And so everybody's in a line asking for stuff. And what's the point? How did he become the Don besides murdering a few people? Well, he became the Don by helping people. That's fundamentally what the mafia was. It was a group of people, immigrants, that were helping the people that had also immigrated from Italy, and they provided protection, and they provided resources, and they provided housing, and they provided policing. And so the point is, the more you help people, the more you are someone that can help people. And someone that can help people is a powerful person. And so even though I also believe it's the right thing to do, and I believe in, the basics of the Judeo-Christian framework, and, of just give before you get, and the golden rule, it also is a strategy for professional success, but it's predicated on, let me let me help as many people as I can, and let me not ask for anything in return. And in so doing, I will accumulate credits in the bank of karma, but also I will separate and differentiate myself, because everybody else is transactional and short-term focused. Everybody else wants 10% of this introduction and 5% of that. And when you don't ask for those things, you look different. You position yourself as apart and unique. So long answer to your question, but that's my approach to networking is how can I help? That's how I
Yeah.
think about it.
I love that. That is how I live my life. I believe we should all help and be kind. And in addition to all of those things that you said, because I do think that it makes you the go-to person. It makes you influential. It helps you position yourself differently and set yourself apart. But it also brings you joy. Like
Of
I
course.
genuinely feel good when I help somebody, and that just makes the world a better place. So how do you weave joy into the book and into this whole process that you've come up with?
The book is like, the story of somebody that wasn't succeeding that found a way
Yeah.
to succeed. And for most of my life, joy was not a part of it. I was frustrated and I was unhappy. And so I there's a couple key things that I did. The first thing was I hired a coach, and the coach said, "What do you stand for?" And I said, "Well, that's the most ridiculous question I've ever heard. I stand for making money." Like, what does that mean? He said, "Well, it's not anything you can stand for. Money comes after you do the good thing, not before."
Yep.
And so we went on this exercise together where I truly figured out, where do I get joy? Where do I drive energy? And what do I stand for? And it was this 3-week process. And at the end of it, I came out with this mission statement. And the mission statement is, I stand for helping people I care about and respect achieve their professional goals. And that's not word for word the mission statement of Pavilion, but it's pretty damn close.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was, first of all, the shortest answer to your question is reflection. If I can reflect on where I find, and a lot of people don't, they don't stop and think, this activity that I just did made me happy. Why did it make me happy? I think the act of reflection is really powerful to help you find where you derive joy. And then the other thing I would say is, there's another part of the book where, it's talking about kindness, but the real kindness principle that I articulate is not to other people, but it's to yourself. And there's this, one of the most important epiphanies I've had in my life is that I have not been kind enough to myself. And I needed to be more supportive and nurturing. One of the things I like to say is, if the voice inside your head was an outside person, would you be friends with that person? Because for a long time, I wouldn't have been friends with that person. I would have thought they were a jerk. So part of me finding joy is building in practices that help me develop self-compassion. And that brings me peace, and it helps set my mind at ease. And I've got all kinds of different rituals that I do. I have this thing called a good day spreadsheet. It's like 5 different activities where if I do those things, I may not feel super happy right now, but I know that I'm working towards that basic goal. And so, long story long is that, self-compassion is one of the key principles for me that helped me find joy in life.
I love that. I literally just had this conversation. A gentleman had reached out to me about a speaking engagement, and I started asking him, like, okay, well, let's help me understand your framework for your team and what you're looking for. And he came out and he said, I'm simply motivated by money. And I said, okay, well, I can appreciate that's where you're coming from, but none of us are really truly motivated by money. Money is a tool for something that we want. And so tell me what you need money for. Like, why is it this focus? And so he told me, his personal story of divorce and a business partnership falling apart, and his aging parents, and how he wanted them to be able to live with dignity. And I was like, well, there is your greater purpose right there. Like, you have, something very visceral that happened to you, and you have this, this genuine desire to be able to take care of your parents. So you have think about those things, because what you say and what you think is what you manifest. And so when you say I'm only about money, when you just told me 3 very real things that touched my heart, and I felt for you, it's so much more compelling, not only for you and how you live your life, but how that's going to translate to your team about why they're helping you build a company. And he was like, oh my God, I've never thought about it like that. And I think that's such, what you just went through with what you went through those years ago with your coach, and having that epiphany of there is something that's so much more here. And it doesn't mean that I don't want to make money, right? That I don't want to be successful and ambitious, like you said earlier. But boy, when I really understand those intrinsic motivations and why, it makes it so much more purposeful.
Yeah,
Than,
100%.
and it helps you not go down that slippery slope of maybe making bad decisions, maybe unethical decisions, all of those, if you stay rooted in why am I really doing this?
I agree with you completely. And I also think relatedly, it helps you have a longer term perspective. And
Yeah.
I think that that's why I say play a big long game versus a short small game, because so many people are transactional. So many people are, and sometimes they're doing it because they think they're worried that they're going to get screwed. Sometimes they're doing it because they've never been taught any different or any better. But I really think that if you can figure out what brings you joy, then money can become incidental. And it was only, exactly to your point about, what you manifest is what appears. There, my coach talks about how, thinking negative things and being negative, like, I forget the exact quote, but it's basically like, never has more been lost by people thinking one thing and
Yeah,
expecting another.
exactly.
People have obsessing about negativity and thinking that is the path to positivity, and it's not. The path to positivity is positivity. And so, you have to, at any rate, I could talk about this for hours, but I completely agree that it's about finding the joy in the everyday. And when you let go of the need to have certain things, that tends to be when they appear.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. I've been going through kind of this transformational process. I decided I wanted to quit drinking. It's just, COVID, all of that. And then I did better and then traveled a lot. And I was like, gosh, I'm having a glass of wine every single day. Like, come home, have a glass of wine while I'm making dinner. And like, I don't like how I feel. I don't like how I look. And I've been thinking about this for a year. And I finally said, you know what? I'm going to be that person who does the New Year's resolution. And I'm going to do dry January and I'm going to do a fast and I am just going to get this under control. And so I started out with dry January, and the first week kind of sucked. And then, now I'm like going to do dry February because I feel so awesome. And then 2.5 weeks later, I did a 5-day fast, and I literally I feel amazing. I'm sleeping amazing. I lost like 8 pounds, and I was meditating, and I was visualizing, the continued success that I had. It just popped in my mind. You cannot manifest unless you decide and you act. So all that year, I've been thinking about wanting to quit drinking, wanting to lose weight, and just hoping that maybe these little tweaks would change it, but I would just fall back into my normal patterns. And it's like, duh, of course I know that. But I think that's a really important piece of this, right? It's like you have to come from a place of positivity, abundance, right? What do I want? Not what do I not want? And then you have to decide and act, because as soon as I did it, because I approached it with positivity and resolve, like everything just shifted and changed. And then I manifested what I wanted. And so I think that's a big part of it too, is like a lot of people will just put the things out there that they want, but then they really don't want to take the action and do the work to make it happen. And you cannot manifest without action.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for letting me rant.
No problem.
It was so funny when I had this and I was like, oh my God, you're such an idiot. Like, of course. Yeah.
I don't think you're an idiot. It's hard to stop drinking.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
I was trying to do dry January too, but I had a CEO summit like the next week, so then it became a moist January.
Moist
Now there's
January. Yeah.
complete
That's what my husband
mostly
said.
dry.
My husband's
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to do dry, but I'll have a moist January with
Yeah,
you.
I'll just drink less.
All right. So I do want to ask you a couple more questions before we wrap things up. You talked about, the play on your book, right? Kind folks finish first instead of nice guys finish last. What is the difference between nice and kind? Because I know you've got some thoughts on that.
I can only speak for myself. Kim Scott wrote this book, Radical Candor, and she talks about like ruinous empathy. And I think nice is superficial and kindness is more, has more depth to it. Kindness is not about what kind of mood you're in. And the funny story, by the way, is that the book was originally called Nice Folks Finish First. And then I went for a run one day with my good friend, and he said, so what's the book called? I said, Nice Folks Finish First. And he said, huh. And I said, what? Because it was a very pregnant pause. And he said, I think a lot of things about you, Sam. You're a great guy. Nice is not, that's not the first word that comes to mind. And he's right. And he's right. And I'm not, I'm a pretty moody person. I'm a pretty grumpy person. My zodiac sign is Cancer, and everybody says I'm like, out of central casting for that zodiac sign, if you believe in that stuff. But I'm not, I'm grumpy, I'm moody. If we made a bunch of sales that day or had a bunch of signups, I'll be over the moon. Like, my mood basically just tracks to our business performance. But that's not what kindness is about. Kindness is about doing the right thing. It's about having a moral code. And it's also not about, again, it's not about ruinous empathy. The kindest thing might be to give somebody really tough feedback that they absolutely need to hear. The kindest thing might be parting ways with somebody where it's just not a good fit for their skill set, and you need to let them go free so that they can find what they're meant to do, as people have done that for me. And a big part of the book is, if you think it's me, bitching, pardon my French, about all of the people that fired me, it's not. I'm grateful to those people. So for me, kindness is about how you behave and how you actually act, not the mood that you're in, not whether you're smiling every second of the day, not whether you're the most cheerful person. And by the way, being cheerful is awesome. And, God bless the people that are like massive extroverts that can handle that all the time. But for me, kindness is just about something more profound. It's about a way of engaging with other human beings and animals, frankly, and the world and the earth in a way that demonstrates respect, empathy, and compassion. So, but, I'm sure if you looked it up in the dictionary, they'd be like, that's not really the difference. So those are my differences.
Well, I love your differences, and I could not agree with you more.
Fair enough. Well, thank you.
All right, I have 2 more questions for you before we wrap things up. And this is going to tie so well into your reflection comment. So the name of my podcast is Reflect Forward. Reflection is something very important to me as well. I would not be alive if I would not have done some serious self-reflection. What does Reflect Forward mean to you?
It's interesting that you say that, because I have an answer for this.
Great.
So there's this concept called future casting, and it was what I was going to say when you talked about manifestation and decisive action, which is that one of the ways, because hope is not a strategy, right? Like, I want to lose weight, doesn't really work. I need to have a plan. And one of the ways that I've found to have a plan is to, part of, like, to your point, right? Gratitude is the frequency most harmonious with abundance in the universe, right? Like, so how do you feel abundant? How do you act like the person that already has instead of the person that wants? Well, you put yourself in the shoes of that person. And for so long, in my life, I hope that I will, which implies it definitively creates uncertainty. That's kind of the point of it, right? Like, I do not have these things. I don't even have a plan to get them, but I hope that I will. Whereas what I do now is called, future casting, which just basically means you put yourself in your own shoes in the future, you reflect forward, and you look back on the year that was, or the 6 months that were, and you describe where you are with great detail so that it's not foreign, it's not exotic, it's right here, And so every year between Christmas and New Year's, and then I'm trying to do it every 6 months actually, but I write a reflection, and I'm like, okay, it's January 4th, 2024. I'm sitting here at the same dining room table, and it all worked out, and it was great. Here's what happened. The company hit this goal. My relationship with my wife is here. This is how I'm feeling about, our family. This is how I'm feeling about the dogs, or whatever it may be. And here's how it happened. Well, we did this, and we did that, and we did this. And I really believe very strongly in this technique, and especially not just the concrete actions. I ran an 8-minute mile marathon, 3:29 or 45 seconds, whatever the actual time is. Like, it's about the scene. We call them scaffolding images. Like, what's the scene, and so I try, it's like, so the funny story I have in the time that we have left, I did this in December of 2020, and my company had gone through we'd grown 4 or 5x during COVID. And so I thought, maybe, I'd never thought about raising money, but I thought maybe I'll try and raise some money. So I said, okay, it's a year from now. We raised $30 million. We're profitable, so some of that $30 million went into my pocket, and it's the week between Christmas and New Year's, and I'm on a yacht, and it's in the Caribbean, and I'm wearing Villa Brequin swim trunks, And, I'm wearing a linen shirt, and this is the music that I'm listening to. And, my wife's in the other room. And I had said it a year in the future, but there were details about the transaction. There were details about the boat. And two months after that happened, I got an email from the venture capital firm that ended up investing in us. A week after that, they sent me a term sheet for $25 million, not 30, but pretty damn close. The terms of the deal were pretty close to what I had written down in my journal. And we celebrated the summer of 2021 on a yacht in the middle of the Amalfi Coast. And it was weird. And I have it written down in my journal. I have it I'm like, this is where I wrote 25 million. So anyway, my point is, that's what Reflect Forward means to me.
I love it. What a great story. I am so with you. I do something very similar. And the one thing that I add to that is I talk about the obstacles I'm going to have to overcome, because I think that's a thing that people miss in manifesting, right? You think about what you want and all the good things, but then when all of a sudden, something blows up and you have to overcome it. So I imagine okay, this is going to be hard. I'm gonna have to go through a tough negotiation to be able to get this deal done. And it's going to be emotional, and, my ego might want to step in the way, but, I get through this. And so I found that helps with resilience in those moments. When you are trying to manifest this certain outcome, to also imagine and reflect on what you're going to have to overcome, because there's no doubt that there's going to be roadblocks along the way.
I think I'm going to add that, because that's a great addition, and you're right. And you can't get so disheartened when there is a roadblock that you give up.
Exactly. That's it. If you just only imagine all these amazing things happening, and then when all of a sudden a roadblock is there, exactly. I think you're
like,
just
that vision's out the window.
Yep, exactly. Oh, that wasn't so easy.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. One final question. What advice do you have for leaders who are looking to be the very best at what they do?
Tactical advice: stop drinking just like you did. Get some good sleep.
Yes.
Good sleep is so important. I think leadership, you're the expert, but here's what I would say. I would say that people want something to believe in, as I mentioned earlier. Dan Pink talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I think purpose is really important. I think that people want to believe that what they're doing connects to something bigger than themselves, while they also want the space to develop their own competency and expertise in their skill. And so my advice to leaders, my advice to myself, is over-communicate the vision, over-communicate the end state, over-communicate why we're here, how does this connect? You were doing something boring and tedious today. Here's why it connects to the big picture. Here's how it fits into the overall jigsaw puzzle, the mosaic that is our journey together towards this beautiful destination. Not rocket science, but just always bears repeating that people need something to look ahead to.
Yep. You're speaking my love language. Literally. Oh my God, I talk about purpose and vision so much. I'm sure my executive management team is like, just stop. But I'm like, but everybody has to, people have to care. It is not just about being a paycheck. They have to care deeply in their hearts about what we're trying to do here. We are trying to build $1 billion company with no outside capital. Is really, really, really hard to do. So
yes, it is very hard to do.
I know, almost impossible. People tell me it's impossible, and I'm like, well, I'm going to try. But
I don't think Sarah Blakely took a bunch of outside capital. I don't. Yeah. It's not impossible.
It's not impossible. It's just hard. But you have to have people who want to care more, right? We're going to have a lot of hard work ahead of us, and it can't just be about $1 billion valuation. Although for my employees, it pays because they're employee owners. And so, they get to share in the success of this march. But, that's always secondary anyway, right? It's, do I like my job? Do I like my coworkers? Do I have an opportunity to do something meaningful at work every day? Do I have autonomy? All of those things are what makes being the human experience, right? Not having a bunch of money.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Sam, this has been so amazing. I literally could talk to you all day.
Well, thank you for having me. I've loved being here.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Hang tight, everybody. I'll be right back. All right, everyone. I am back. I hope you enjoyed that incredible interview. Be sure to check out Pavilion. They're doing really cool things. And with that, I will leave you to your day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And if you like this podcast, please like it, write a review, go to iTunes, Spotify, subscribe to it, share it with a friend. It always helps with the algorithms and it helps spread these amazing stories like Sam. I mean, who can't learn from that interview right there? All right. See you next week. Thanks.